Welcome to, dare I say, Make Today Pay, yet another opportunity to tune in to better ways of thinking and behaving relative to your own success. And of course, in your life, in your relationships, but also in your profession, and particularly if you're in sales like I am, and particularly real estate sales like I am. A lot of the illustrations I use come from that. Um, and I want to talk today about something I call the activity effect. And this is a different way to look at the topic of activity because activity, according to the dictionary, is going to have a pretty basic, initial definition. I mean, there are ones for engineering and chemistry and science, but just generally, you know, um, being in the state of putting something into a state of movement, activity in some way. Um, so, okay, you get it. It's simple, not complicated, not rocket science. But there are actually three states of activity. And we don't think in these terms so much, particularly when it comes to our process of achievement and getting more of what it is we want out of our life and having to settle for less of whatever it is we just seem to get. Um, because you've got inaction, motion, and action. These are the three states of activity. And you might think, well, wait a minute, how could inaction be activity? Well, because you're doing nothing. The verb to do, you're doing nothing. Okay. Versus motion, you're doing something. Versus action, you're doing something well. And these are the states of activity that we don't tend to think of that much. Now, let's look at that first state, inaction. Well, if you're just not moving, if you're just not going into any kind of endeavor or effort, you're not going to get much out of it, are you? You're not going to have what we'll call productivity or production. In real estate sales, for example, we talk in terms of doing business as our production. The transactions or deals that we produce are our production. Hence the term, top producer, for example. All right. So if you're stuck in this state of inaction, you're not going to do any business unless there's a lightning strike, unless it's, lucky somehow. And so this is a problem. A lot of people, they simply don't get out of bed in the morning. I always remember watching the movie about, in part, about Julia Child. Um, um, I think it was called Julia, and it was showing how her husband was in the um, consulate world, and he was stationed in Paris. And so she was excited to go to Paris. They were excited to go to Paris, but he had work. He had a purpose. And she would get up in the morning and wonder what she's going to do. And after she'd seen the Eiffel Tower and gone all over town and been to the museums, she's starting to want to have a purpose herself. And so she starts taking courses to perhaps get busy and maybe find a direction. And she's, um, you know, doing some things with fashion and various things, some volunteer work. And she ultimately each morning gets out of bed and it shows her foot coming out of bed and hitting the ground. And she plods over to the closet to get dressed. And then she takes this cooking class. And she's so interested and finding it so fascinating, even though in the movie the original coaches were a little hard on her. But that's not the point, because that next morning the camera pans to her feet as she gets out of bed and she hits the ground running. She wants to get dressed, get back to cooking, and she had this purpose. So not getting out of bed is a problem. Getting out of bed and not knowing what you want to do, that could be motion. So you got inaction, you got motion, but getting out of bed with a purpose that you're passionate about, and you take action in that way, there you go. You're using that state of activity, action. And it was Benjamin Franklin, purportedly, who said that, or admonished, I guess, advised, never confuse or mistake motion with action. And this goes on in our lives a lot. We get stuck thinking that what we're doing is effective when it's really not that effective. But it's lots better than being stuck doing nothing, isn't it? Maybe we could come up with some examples where that's not always the case, but you get the progression. Doing nothing yields nothing. Doing something might yield something, but it's questionable in terms of how that's going to work. But doing something well, that's going to be a real difference maker for you. But it's only well if it's action, and it's only action if it's aligned with the thing that's important to you to get done well, and aligned in the sense of the right technique, the right approach. Now, nobody's perfect. Nobody does everything the right way all the time, although some people elevate themselves to a level where they're not making that many mistakes. They're doing it pretty darn good. But most people, we're in the process in our lives of overcoming ourselves. We get in our own way. And other things too come up to hold us back. I was asked the other day in a talk to agents in New York who'd never heard me speak before, um, how I dealt with the limitations of COVID. And I explained to them that COVID for me was not a limitation. And they were like, well, why? We couldn't hold open houses. We couldn't go out with clients. We couldn't show property. And I said, you have to understand, and this is one of the 12 tenets of opportunity that I write and talk about so often. You have to understand that change is opportunity going in a new direction. So the change from pre-COVID to COVID meant I had to redefine where opportunity was, but it wasn't gone. It was just headed in new directions. So I ramped up my being on the phone business, and I tuned in to how change was affecting and people being affected, or how COVID was causing change in people's lives. And I started to see a pattern. I saw that remote working was taking off, and that people could leave what we'll call in our general Southern California area coastal metropolitan and move to areas with less pollution, less traffic, maybe less crime, maybe better weather. And that's where we were. And so I started to tap in and tune into this flow, this immigration, this cultural shift that was happening because of COVID. And I did great in my business. Whereas there were many, many agents who were stuck because they didn't view change as opportunity, and they were waiting for it to change back. That's expensive. And that's why I love the saying, life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And it's up to you to determine the best use of what's happening. And this is one of my favorite lifetime sayings I heard from John Wooden many years ago. He said, the best things happen to the people who make the best of the things that happen. Wow, that's true. And it's true and incredible. And I want to be that person. I want to be that person that's turning lemons into lemonade, essentially, that's spotting the silver lining in any cloud, whose expectation is that there's always opportunity, and whose understanding is that change is opportunity heading in a new direction. This allows me to get into action and be more effective than to just be in motion. In real estate, I always say far too many agents are stuck in the busyness. That's business, but spelled with a Y. They're filling their time doing all kinds of things, and there's all kinds of things you can do, but none of it's helping them really move forward today in terms of the identification of new business. Got to watch out for that. Motion versus action. action can only happen when it's today, and it's only action if it's in alignment with your objectives. The things that you're doing further the thing or the pursuit of the thing you're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, it's motion. Or worse, you give up because nothing's happening. COVID's happening, so I'm done until COVID's over. Now you're in inaction, and that's a form of activity too. Again, doing nothing is doing nothing. It's an activity. And so we as people have all this power at our disposal. We have this incredible capacity. The question is, do we turn it into ability? Do we take this capacity that we're born hardwired with and marshal it in the direction of our dreams? Now, I don't want to point at myself as the person to emulate in all ways, but I have to say, in large part, great parts of my life are in a spot that I want them to be. And when I run into someone who's frustrated, or I hear myself waxing in frustration, and that happens, I'm not perfect. I counsel myself, or I counsel those people, to remember that our success is on us. We're not victims unless we allow it. We're always in a position to be the victor. So I don't want to practice self-victimization. I want to practice self-victorization and be that person who's true to my objectives and my goals, and that those are important to me enough for me to adopt behaviors that are effective and to be in action in that way, versus in motion, waiting for things to happen to me because I know I got to be working and there's so much I could do. Let me start checking off that list, but they're not necessarily the things that apply to the job at hand relative to that goal or that objective. And then there's inaction. Remember Julia Child, okay? Once she found her passion, she couldn't wait. She hit the floor running and no longer was delaying. Inaction is a killer. Motion is a confuser. Action is where you want to be. And that's why I like the saying that a dream is something desired. A goal is a dream with a deadline. And commitment is a goal with action. I want to be the committed type. As a coach, all I have to do to discern a person's level of commitment is watch what they're doing. They can tell me ABC, XYZ, but if I watch what they're doing, I can gauge their true level of commitment, because we do what's most important to us. So the things we're doing are what we're committed to. What if you're committed to inaction? Uh-oh. What if you're committed to motion? Not as good as you want to be, but what if you're truly committed to action? What if you're taking steps that are effective and relative to the direction you dream about, that you're shooting for? If you do that, if you make that your way, great things are going to be happening to you as you move forward. And I call it the activity effect, because you've got these three states: inaction, motion, and action. Where do you want to be? It's your choice. It's up to you. It's on you. So go out there, get into action, and make today pay. And going along, remember to subscribe, to like, and continue showing up. I love having you here. Fred Wilson signing out.